So now we're going to pivot a little bit and talk about how what we teach in ABA during the day can support the bedtime routine. So one of these first foundational skills is going to be teaching sitting. If a child is constantly moving around and isn't able to sit for very long during the day, it's going to be really difficult for them to slow their bodies down long enough to fall asleep at bedtime. So we really want to give them plenty of opportunities throughout the day to practice being seated in a variety of different places. So maybe at a desk or at the kitchen table or on the floor. And then it'll usually be best to start with some highly preferred activities that can be done seated, and just asking the child to sit while doing the activity for a brief period of time before standing again. And this will help them start to associate being seated with a fun activity, and then also get them prepared for teaching calming leisure skills, which we'll talk about in a few slides. Then next, we want to teach the child the skills of following directions if that is a skill deficit they have. So following a bedtime routine generally involves a large number of instructions. So if the child isn't fluent with following these instructions during the day, it's going to be really difficult for them to follow them at night. So we want to find out what types of directions parents would like them to follow during the bedtime routine, and then work on them first during the day. A lot of times bedtime directions end up sounding like, okay, go upstairs, put your pajamas on, brush your teeth. So we definitely want to break these instructions down and make sure that they can follow those one-step directions first before we build up to any of these multi-step directions. And then it can also be helpful to teach following a visual schedule during ABA if that's appropriate for the child. And we might want to work up to a schedule that looks similar to the bedtime routine. So maybe including activities like toileting, brushing teeth, reading books, so that they really become fluent with following that schedule during the day and have less difficulty moving through it at night. Then one of the hardest aspects of the bedtime routine is that it naturally requires kids to give up the activities they were doing in order to start getting ready for bed. So if relinquishing reinforcers causes the child to get escalated or engage in challenging behaviors, it's going to be very difficult for them to settle down and get to sleep. So we really want to make sure that kids are able to calmly transition away from any items they may be engaging with before starting that bedtime routine. So this may mean that we want to bring in some more of those powerful reinforcers like electronics into ABA sessions, just for the purpose of the child practicing giving them up more frequently throughout the day without all of that burden placed on families at night. Another way that ABA can support the routine is teaching some calming leisure skills. So for a lot of our kids, leisure skills consist only of active play, like jumping on the trampoline or bouncing on an exercise ball. And those are great, but they're also going to need some of those calmer leisure skills in their repertoire to really get their bodies to settle down. So we want to program in these seated calming leisure skills both throughout the day and then especially after any highly stimulating active play. So for kids that don't have these foundational leisure skills, maybe we just start by creating some simple activities like a Velcro file folder with some preferred character matching. And then maybe for kids that do have some more of these foundational skills, we might start teaching longer things like puzzles or coloring. For most kids, they'll probably need some type of support to engage in the leisure skills at first. But making a plan to fade adults and get them independent with at least a few minutes of an activity can put less burden on the parents. One important point here is that we want to carefully observe how the child responds to the different activities that we try out. We might have an idea that an activity will be really calming, but for some reason it might end up just being very overstimulating to a particular child. So then obviously we wouldn't want to put that activity in the bedtime routine. Another big part of the routine is engaging in self-care skills like toileting, toothbrushing, brushing hair, changing clothes, things like that. So if kids can't tolerate these activities and do end up escalated at bedtime, that's going to push their fall asleep time later. So ABA can help here by getting kids comfortable with engaging in these activities during the day. For some kids, independence with these activities isn't going to be the goal, but it'll still be important that they tolerate and cooperate with a trusted adult helping them through these self-care skills. And then for other kids, it might be really beneficial to start teaching them independence with some of these skills, which could make the activities feel less aversive. And one strategy that can be helpful there is giving some choice. I find that since self-care skills usually aren't optional, sometimes that can make kids feel somewhat out of control. So even small choices between something like strawberry or mint toothpaste might be helpful here. And then lastly, teaching flexibility is also going to be important for the bedtime routine to really help kids tolerate when unexpected things come up. So even though we're striving to keep the bedtime routine consistent, we also don't want it to become so rigid that kids can't tolerate when natural changes come up, like some nights mom does routine, some nights dad, or some nights my Spider-Man pajamas are dirty and I need to wear the Batman ones. So if slight changes at bedtime do escalate the child and make it difficult for them to settle down to sleep, we definitely want to program for increasing flexibility during the day. And one way we can do that is to just really start with neutral items that the child doesn't care that much about. So for example, if coloring isn't their favorite, but they'll cooperate, maybe we just start incorporating some language like, oh, it looks like we're all out of blue crayons today. We'll have to use red or yellow, just to really get them used to sometimes everything is not available. And then with success, we can build up to things that they have a stronger preference for. So maybe letting them know, oh, the green cup is dirty today. You can have red or blue, instead of always making sure that the green cup is clean for them. And then lastly, we want to look at how kids might want to have control over caregivers' bodies, which will likely also come into play at bedtime. So if a child likes to direct adults to sit in certain places or engage in certain actions, we can think about programming them for them to tolerate that not happening all the time. So for example, if the child is pulling the caregiver to sit on the floor, maybe sometimes the caregiver says, oh, I'm going to sit in this chair for a minute and then I'll join you, to really build up that toleration for them moving their bodies away at bedtime. So now if we've tried a bunch of different antecedent strategies and bedtime resistance is still occurring, another option we can look at is using the bedtime pass. So the bedtime pass should only be used when the sleep schedule is right and the child knows how to fall asleep on their own. The bedtime pass involves giving kids a pass to exchange for being allowed to come out of their room one time after bedtime for a short specific purpose. So maybe getting a drink, getting a hug, using the bathroom, things like that. And it was invented by Pat Fryman in 1999. And he published a study on it with two typically developing brothers who were ages 3 and 10. And they both engaged in frequent crying and coming out of their room after bedtime. So in this study, each child was given a card with their name on it and told they could exchange it for one visit outside of their room after bedtime. Then after the visit, the child had to turn in their pass to parents until the following night. And parents were told to guide the child back to their room without accessing what they requested if they did come out again after turning in their pass. And the results of this study showed that after the bedtime pass was introduced, rates of crying and coming out of their room were reduced to 0 rates for both boys and maintained at a 3-week follow-up. Dr. Fryman did put in some commentary on this study. So he said that it might not be developmentally appropriate for kids under 3, and for kids over 10, they may need some more sophisticated contingencies. And then Dr. Fryman also said that he's had limited success with kids that score 1 standard deviation or more above the mean on behavior problem checklists. So it probably won't be an appropriate choice for children with those higher levels of behaviors. Then in 2006, Freeman set out to replicate Fryman's study across 4 3-year-old children. And they also found that the bedtime pass was effective and they didn't have any extinction bursts during the study. So that was very cool as well. And then there's some other variations of the pass that are commonly used. So you could give kids a higher number of passes at first, so that they really contact that reinforcement and slowly fade down to one pass. And you could also allow kids to hold on to their pass all night and turn it in the morning for a special treat or activity. It is important to note that the evidence for the bedtime pass is based on participants that can communicate in sentences and respond to directions from parents.